Welcome to your Daily 5 for Wednesday, February 12th, 2025. In the most recent video, at least as of this recording, the most recent video released over on the Jimquisition YouTube channel, Stephanie Sterling was talking about the head or one of the higher-ups at EA who was talking about how the newest Dragon Age game didn't do as well as they thought because it should have been a live service game or something like that. The content of the video was unfortunately very familiar if you followed the Jimquisition channel for a while, which is that the people who are in the most authoritative positions at most of the leading video game companies probably know the least about making video games that people actually want to play or, running a company ethically. But beyond that, there was a sentiment at the end of the video, and I won't get this verbatim, but it went something along the lines of, this is the kind of thing that makes me just want to play and read about PlayStation 2 games. And when I heard that, it resonated with me because I didn't think about this in a really conscious way at all until I watched that video. But I have been really diving into YouTube channels that are specifically about older games, many times older, kind of more obscure games, but they do tend to be games from specifically the PlayStation 1 and PlayStation 2 era, that type of thing. And I didn't really think about why. I think it started off as just me finding out about these weird games that never necessarily got North American releases or had been lost media for a long time. But now that I've been watching these for a while, and it's channels like Tango Mushi, I think, is one, Sean Shawnson, Grimbeard, these types of people who cover these older games, and in some case very janky, broken games. And I think that it's part of exactly what that sentiment is talking about, what Stephanie was talking about, this idea that I'm just kind of tired and uninterested in modern games because they all feel so similar. Oftentimes, not all of them. There are games that are exceptions, of course. I'm not saying that there's no good games anymore. There are. And many of them are coming from the lesser, and I'm putting quotes around that because that's how most people would classify it as, but not the AAA studios, not the leading names, not EA and Activision and, what's the other one? Any of the Microsoft studios. I'm trying to think of who makes Starfield. Whatever. It doesn't matter. Bethesda. It's not those people who are making the interesting games these days. It's people who are smaller independent studios or just smaller teams or what would be considered single A or double A games. And watching these older videos where these often very long deep dive videos on these older games, one of the things that you realize, particularly about the PlayStation 1, the Sean Shawnson videos where he's basically just doing a roulette wheel of all these PS1 titles, most of which I'd never heard of, is just how much diversity and variety there was, not only in what the games were about, but how the games played. There was so much experimentation. This was before a lot of the things that we take as kind of the standard way of doing video games, controls, the way games are laid out, these giant checkpoint-filled maps. All this stuff was so in flux. There wasn't any real particular standard for it because it was a major transition point into the 3D space. And, away from cartridge-based to CD, but also just the way that games were being put together and released was so haphazard and so just kind of all over the place that, yes, many of these games are probably next to unplayable, but at the same time, you look at some of them, and even those unplayable ones, there is such a depth of imagination and interesting ways of presenting gameplay that we just don't get that much of anymore from the people who are the leaders in the space. And look, that's great for independent studios and their titles. I certainly don't want those to disappear, but it is I think, an indictment on the fact that most of these companies that are commanding the lion's share of investment money into video games are just all copying each other and doing the same failed things and not really actually listening to what people who are playing games want or responding to them or producing games that are interesting and different. Nobody's taking chances, and they're leaving that stuff to the smaller studios to do, which, again, good for the smaller studios because that is providing the evidence that it is not whether you have $2 billion to make a video game, but if you have imagination and drive. But it does tell you how different it is now from when it was before. And maybe that's because we're due for a big shakeup in the way that people are playing games. Maybe that'll be, the Vision Pro or something. But like I said, I heard that sentiment and it really connected to me because that just feels like lately I've just wanted to play older games and watch stuff about older games. So yeah, I don't know what that means. I don't know if that has any actual long-term impact, but it's just something that happened to strike a chord with me, and I thought I'd talk about it. Later.